Thank you for tuning in to the Practical Preservation Podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, practicalpreservationservices.com, for additional information and tips to help you restore your historical home. If you've not done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, and also like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Practical Preservation Podcast, hosted by Danielle and Jonathan Kepperling. Kepperling Preservation Services is a family-owned business based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the preservation of our built architectural history for today's use as well as future generations. Our weekly podcast provides you with expert advice specific to the unique needs of renovating a historic home, educating by sharing our From the Trenches preservation knowledge and our guests' expertise, balancing modern needs while maintaining the historical significance, character, and beauty of your period home.
Today on the Practical Preservation Podcast, we have Stephen McNair with us from McNair Historic Preservation. Thank you for joining us today.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, yeah. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me your background. How did you get started in preservation?
Sure. So I am from Mobile, Alabama, and I got started in historic preservation by interning with the Mobile Historic Development Commission when I was in high school and then summers in college, and that led me to understand that could become a legitimate career, and that led me to Tulane University, where I received a master's in historic preservation architecture and worked in New Orleans immediately following Hurricane Katrina for about 5 years in the world of development and historic tax credits and government relations and all those kind of things. I actually worked for a private firm and worked for the city at one point. And then that led me to Edinburgh, Scotland, actually, where I received a doctorate in architectural history and taught architecture at the University of Edinburgh, and moved back to the United States about 5 years ago and opened up my firm.
That sounds like an exciting career and places that are, I'm sure they were great to live in because they're great to visit.
Absolutely. No,
yeah,
I miss both places, but at the same time, it's nice to be back in the South where at least we have days over 70 degrees.
Oh yes, that would be the challenge. So, how did you start your business? You moved back to the U.S. and you just decided to go out on your own, or was there a catalyst?
No, I looked at the market and I thought about moving back to New Orleans, and there were already quite a few historic preservation consulting firms and consultants who were established in the city, and I thought about partnering with one of them or maybe trying to open up my own shop, but then I looked back at my home state of Alabama and realized that there was a real market there. There was a real demand because there was a lack of understanding in the development community and also at the municipal level in terms of downtown development, historic tax credits, different incentives. There was just kind of a blank canvas, and my returning back home also coincided with the passage of an Alabama historic tax credit program, which our state had never had before. So it really coalesced into the perfect timing of coming back home and introducing something new to the state, while also being on the front end of a new program of incentives for developers.
So, and I think you mentioned in your email to me that you helped with the passage of the Alabama tax credit. Is that correct? Or
that's correct. We worked on the language and helped, I'd say, tangentially the first time. But the problem, when I say the first time, so our state had a program, and then it went away. And it went away because there was a misunderstanding of how to use it. There was a misunderstanding of how to make it benefit communities other than the large municipalities such as Birmingham. And so our state legislature actually ended the program, and that's where our firm really helped, with quite a few partners, of course, helped write the new legislation, lobby the members of the House and Senate, and actually get it passed, and it's a much better program. And so we were really hands-on in that process.
I think that's a challenge for most states, especially with huge municipalities and urban areas where the developers might understand those programs a little bit better than the rural areas, and then all the money goes. I know in Pennsylvania, most of the money goes into Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. So I could see that being a challenge, and it's probably a challenge across the country.
There's no question, and one of the ways that the new program addresses that, which I was skeptical of at first, but actually it's worked out quite well, is that for the first 2 quarters of every calendar year, 40% of the annual allocation for Alabama historic tax credits are reserved for counties that are deemed rural, which Alabama has 67 counties, and of those 67, 60 are deemed rural. And so they have first dibs on that money. And then if they don't use it, then after the second quarter, it rolls into the pot where anybody can apply for it. But I think this is something that would be beneficial not only in places like Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana, but across the country. I completely agree.
Yeah. Because there are even in the areas. I mean, we've worked in southern New Jersey, and you would not guess that that's part of New Jersey. It's all farmland, but it doesn't. Yeah. So every state has that, I'm sure. So what services do you offer?
So our firm is a national historic preservation consulting firm, and when I say national, we have clients ranging from North Adams, Massachusetts, to the French Quarter in New Orleans. We're based in Mobile, but we have a Montgomery office as well, and we focus primarily on the Southeast with large clients in Chattanooga, Atlanta, Birmingham, New Orleans. But we definitely travel, and our package is comprehensive in that it's almost twofold. Where there's the municipal and government side, where we help municipalities with National Register historic districts. We help with 106 reviews for different municipalities and different entities, and then but the day-to-day really focuses more on securing federal and state historic tax credits and working hand-in-hand with developers, architects, and contractors to shepherd the project from idea to completion while staying compliant for all the incentives. Right.
Yeah. So are the majority of your, on the private side, the majority of your clients are people who are developing historic properties for commercial use? Would that be accurate?
Yes. And we handle everything from tax abatements and ad valorem reductions to listing properties either individually or within a district on the National Register. And then, of course, the federal historic tax credit program, and we're familiar with at least a dozen of the state programs. So we really try to handle everything from idea to completion.
That's great, because I know that it gets really hard if you try to piecemeal that and pass it off to other people, and things, if there's not good communication, the process is not easy.
I completely agree, and we get a lot of work from people that either try it on their own and fail, and we have to kind of back clean up, or they hire the wrong person who doesn't really know what they're doing, and these programs take a lot of patience and a lot of time and a lot of negotiating with local, state, and federal reviewers and entities. So you've really got to have the right folks who understand this process and can give you a realistic timetable as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It does take time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I noticed that on your website you offer economic incentive consultation. What is that? I wasn't sure exactly what that was.
We try to do some due diligence for free on the front end for clients, and that's really where we identify what the property is currently eligible for, what it could be eligible for, and we sit down and before we sign papers or really do anything, we just like to make sure that everybody understands what's at stake and what's on the table. And so if somebody comes to me and says that they want to, tear down half of an old building and put something new there, and I know it's not going to work, we don't even, we don't take their money.
Right. It's not a good fit. Yeah.
No. So we try to do all that up front, really as a courtesy to prevent somebody from going down a path that's not going to work.
Right. Yeah. And so is that looking for also any grants or tax credits or anything like that, like funding options?
Yes. Yeah, we try to put together a comprehensive list of what is at stake, depending on the property itself and then the vision for the adaptive reuse or the rehabilitation of the property.
So what do you find are the biggest obstacles in planning a preservation project?
The largest obstacles are dealing with the lack of connectivity and continuity between the local reviewers, state reviewers, and federal reviewers. I mean, as you know, just because your local historic commission approves something, that doesn't mean that the SHPO is going to approve it. And just because the SHPO approves something doesn't mean that the National Park Service is going to approve it. And so that's a complicated process to explain to developers and property owners who have money on the line, or they have they have bank loans they have to secure, they have construction budgets they have to take care of, they have quotes and estimates that are only good for a certain amount of time. And so we really try to work as hard as we can to prevent what I call kind of this endless review loop that you can get caught in.
Oh, yeah.
Where no one is really communicating well and everybody is saying that they're right. And at the end of the day, you're just kind of, waiting on a decision to be made. And, we see this from time to time. And so typically what we try to do is work with the SHPO the best we can, but really they're just giving us their best guess on what will work. Since the National Park Service is the ultimate decision maker. And so we work with the SHPO as best we can, and we listen to their comments. But at the same time, we understand that they're just guessing like we are.
Everybody's making their best guess, right.
That's right. And with the National Park Service being understaffed and overworked, and their reviews are becoming much longer than they used to be. It's no longer, there was a window where you could expect a return within about 30 to 60 days, and that is absolutely not the case anymore. And we're seeing things held up in Washington for 3 months, and things at the state level held up longer. So there's a lot of issues there that we try to overcome by getting it right the first time best we can.
Right. So you don't have to, at least that wait up front, and then you don't have to go through it a second time if it doesn't get approved. That makes sense to me. But when you said that, I hadn't realized that the wait was so long now during the review process, and I'm thinking that's really putting the brakes on a lot of development and money that could be flowing if they could get the review process. It seems pretty short-sighted to me.
There's no question, especially when you have a tenant that has a deadline, and I fully appreciate, having been a former employee at the state level and the local level, I fully appreciate the fact that reviewers really aren't supposed to take financial with the finances of any project into consideration. However, there is a realistic side to this that I feel like some basic training of understanding how construction loans work and how the bid process can work would really help them understand why they get a lot of angry phone calls. Because there's a tremendous disconnect of the realities of how a project comes together versus the aesthetics of reviewing a design. And that also goes hand in hand with code issues and with the realities of materials, where you might have a reviewer in Washington say, well, why don't you just move this door, and why don't you just move this one thing or two, which then could increase your budget by $100,000, or maybe from an engineering standpoint might even be impossible or improbable. And and so there is a real disconnect between the realities of a lot of the nuts and bolts of these buildings versus a drawing that's being reviewed.
Well, and they're at a disadvantage too because they haven't seen the site. I think that makes a big difference. Yeah, because if you're just looking at the drawings, you don't necessarily realize everything that you're working around.
I completely agree. I mean, in a perfect world, the SHPO would have plenty of staff and time to visit every project and really give a proper assessment as opposed to just looking at photographs. But that's just not in the cards for the immediate future.
So do you have any tips for people who are planning a preservation project or wanting to do an adaptive reuse that would be a commercial space?
Yeah, you got to have the right team. That's the way to make these projects happen. You've got to be patient. You've got to listen to the SHPO, listen to the Park Service, be willing to negotiate, because there's no such thing as a perfect project. They always have some comment on something. So be willing to have a plan B pretty much for any kind of tenant space. But having the right team will make the difference. And when I say that, what I mean is you have to have a contractor who understands how to deal with maybe doing sensitive demo and then sensitive rehabilitation of windows or any kind of historic fabric. You have to have an architect that understands how to maneuver the fine line between ADA and life safety code compliant issues while also maintaining the character of the building. You've got to have the right consultant to help all this move through the process. You've got to have the right developer who understands timelines and how to be patient. So you just got to have the right team. I see a lot of these where somebody's uncle is the contractor and they don't know what they're doing, or they try to, just hire draftsmen to do the drawings and they don't really know what they're doing. So you spend a little more to have the right team, but what it does is it expedites the process, so then the project is finished faster, so you make money faster.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, when we're talking to homeowners and they, we talk about, not only, hiring the right contractor, but also making sure that the architects and the engineers that you contract with have a background in working in existing and historic buildings, because otherwise they're going to way over engineer, or they're going to do designs that aren't compatible. Does. It makes a big difference if you get people who are sensitive and know they're not learning on your projects then.
Absolutely.
So, is there anything you wish you knew when you got started that you know now? I think it's just institutional knowledge that has to be built up. I wouldn't say there's one or two key factors that I'm looking back on, but it's just a matter also, just like I said, the developer has to be patient. The consultants do as well, because the rules do seem to fluctuate state to state and from even at the federal level, depending on, sometimes I feel like the weather, you get different, responses. But so just knowing how to tame the expectations of your client, as opposed, because they're going to walk in and say, I hear there's free money on the table, and you're going to say, well, there is, but you have to jump through these hoops, and also being able to walk away from a client, because I can't tell you how many clients say, what do you mean I have to keep these windows, or what do you mean I have to do this certain feature? And I tell them all the time, well, you don't have to, but you're asking for free incentives from the taxpayers. Right.
And so you have an option. In my left hand is $1 million, and in my right hand are windows. You choose.
Right. Yeah, you can choose what's most important.
So, having the confidence and the institutional knowledge to be able to say that kind of stuff to a developer and make sure that their expectations from the very beginning is very clear of what they're going to have to keep and what they're going to have to get rid of, or whatever, the case. But so looking back, maybe I was a little more overly optimistic on how fast some of these projects would move forward in my younger years.
Right.
And especially now with this, the current Department of the Interior budget, they're just really overworked and understaffed. Yeah. And so they're having to limit it even more now in terms of timelines and things like that. But just having a realistic understanding of how this process can be very complicated and frustrating, but also extraordinarily rewarding, of course. I mean, that's the great thing about this, is that without these credits and incentives, these projects don't happen. There's I back when I worked for the government, I used to think that people did these projects just because they loved old buildings. Well, they do, but they also really love being able to not go into severe debt to do them.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the balance of being a building hugger while also understanding the realities of finances.
Yeah, and I think that is a balance, and it is to the public benefit to retain these buildings and be able to reuse them. And it's I know that all these things, but it is a green option also, and I think that's right. People, and so it's a public benefit to to have those incentives. It's not just the economic side, which makes sense as to why we have prioritized that, and more states are starting to prioritize that too. So
yeah, that's what's really rewarding about this, is that we're seeing there was a time 15 years ago when so many preservationists were just kind of on an island. And now we're starting to really see the mainstream understand what we've been talking about and why we've been trying to implement historic design guidelines and implement all these programs and code issues when it comes to preserving and protecting a downtown, or even not a downtown, just any historic building. People are starting to really see the benefit here, and that is very rewarding to go into these smaller communities who are starting to say, look, we really regret putting all our emphasis on the interstate exit. Now we're going to emphasize downtown. It's like a generational shift is occurring, which is a lot of fun to watch.
Let's see. So what are the biggest challenges or trends that you see in preservation? Is it the more mainstream adapting, or is there something else that you've seen?
The trends right now, I'd say downtown multifamily housing in urban centers, that people cannot build apartments fast enough in quite a few places, whether it's, Charlotte or Chattanooga or Atlanta. I mean, it's just, there is no limit to the amount of multifamily that's going in. And it's really fun to see the trend where finally I'm seeing a lot of mainstream corporations and engineering firms and different kind of office spaces where 10, 20 years ago they were absolutely looking to be in a strip mall, 20 minutes outside of any kind of urban center. And now these are the groups saying, you know what, our employees want to be downtown. They want to be able to walk to lunch. They want to be able to actually do something after work and not have to drive. And so a lot of these companies that I would have never thought would come back to an urban center are buying old automobile dealerships and old municipal buildings and old churches and doing really great things with them. And part of that is a real demand by the workforce. The boss may not understand it, but the workforce is saying, look, we're younger and we don't want to have to drive 20 minutes to go to a McDonald's. We want to walk 5 minutes to a nice restaurant. So that's really refreshing to see that trend.
Yeah, and I've seen that in Lancaster too. And I think there was one in the paper a few weeks ago maybe that was, the company had moved into the suburbs 50 years ago and now they're moving back downtown. So it is changing. Yeah, it's definitely changing. So I know you talked about like your business is national and the different things. Is there anything that makes your business different from similar businesses, or
There is a lot of consultants. A lot of people who call themselves consultants, it's more of a hobby, I'd say. They work out of their basement or they do this just kind of on the side. And the difference is our firm is much more established in that we have staff, all of which have degrees either in architecture, architectural history, archaeology. We have offices in 2 different cities. And the difference is we are extremely hands-on and proactive. And instead of a lot of consultants just kind of sit back and wait for a phone call, or if there's a change order, or if there's an amendment to an application, they just kind of file it. We take much more of a hands-on approach in that we're on the job site. We're working with your contractor. We're working with your architect. We're helping you through the local review. We do all the presentations at the state level. We're the ones negotiating with the federal agencies. So, we really try to take control of a lot of these projects, and that way the clients can focus on other things, or they can do more than one project at the same time, and we try to mitigate risk. That's the big thing.
Right.
Whether and that of course goes back to your construction loan. I mean, no bank is going to just lend out money just on a whim, especially when you're talking about millions of dollars. And so working with these banks and working with credit investors, to mitigate risk on their behalf. There are quite a few projects where the credits are syndicated, and we're talking about millions of dollars in potential purchases, and that is all predicated on compliance and securing the credits.
Right. Yeah.
So whether it's go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I sat through maybe 5 years ago about the tax credits, and I never realized that banks bought them back, because they have much more passive income than, a developer usually does. And so I just wanted to say that because I didn't know if people listening would understand that's what you meant.
Oh, all the time. I mean, the biggest buyer in credits we're dealing with right now, aside from Bank of America, is Sherwin-Williams Paint.
Really?
They're buying up as many credits as they can. Because any corporation, anybody can buy them, but any entity with a lot of income. But, with that comes a whole lot more of a strenuous regulatory and oversight component of having to report to banks and deal with those guys. So, we do all of that kind of stuff, and it's just a matter of making sure there's no surprises.
as much as we can, and experience makes that much more likely that you've at least seen the problems and either know how to avoid them or know how to solve them.
That is exactly right.
Yeah. So how can our listeners contact you?
Yeah, they can go to our website, which is McNairHP.com. That's McNair, H as in historic and P as in preservation.com. They can contact us on there. We have a Facebook page where we show some of our projects and also kind of update the public on tax credit issues in different states and at the national level. So they can find us on Facebook, find us on the website, and we're always open to coming to different communities and looking at different buildings and seeing how we can help bring back to life historic properties.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time this morning.
No, happy to do it, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Preservation Podcast. The resources discussed during this episode are on our website at practicalpreservationservices.com/podcast. If you received value from this episode and know someone else that will get value from it as well, please share it with them. Join us next week for another episode of the Practical Preservation Podcast. For more information on restoring your historic home, visit practicalpreservationservices.com.